All right, welcome again. Another Swim Smart webinar. Thanks for all who are joining live. My name's Carl. I'm the founder of Swim Smart, and I wrote a bunch of these books, and this is where a lot of this information comes from. So today we're going to talk about kind of sports psychology, building that mental toughness, and specifically we're going to try to take all these concepts and put them on the pool deck, right? Because there's no use in talking about all this theory and not being able to take away something that we can actually use with our swimmers, use with our swim team. So very, very big topic. Obviously, there's a lot of people out there who give these motivational speeches, right? You can look up on YouTube Tony Robinson and who is it, Jocko. There's 1,000 of them, right? So that's not my goal today. My goal is not to sit here and give you this motivational talk and everyone's inspired and we're all going to go out and swim fast. My goal today is to take it back to the basics, kind of lay out a lot of the terms and definitions and some of the biology behind how some of these things arise so that when we go to teach our kids about controlling themselves, getting their brain in the right spot, we have somewhere of authority to come from, right? So again, for those who are interested, webinar 20 is the coupon code. You get 20% off. Okay, great. And then if you go to swimsmarttoday.com, the bookstore, the courses, the products are all up at the top. So I won't talk too much about that. I want to talk more about psychology here. Let me get this set up. I always have to swap, and I need my pen. Okay, let me turn this down. And I'm keeping an eye on the chat, so if questions come up, concerns, comments, please let me know. I'll try to get to them. So big topic. Obviously, you could spend hours on like each little section here, but this is kind of the goal for today. We're going to start with kind of the biology, like where does all this like mental stuff actually come from? And then we're going to talk about motivation. So getting yourself to do the tough thing or getting your swimmers to do the tough thing. What are the components? How do we build that up? How are we going to improve this, just like kicking, just like butterfly, something that we can practice. Another big topic, a couple of years ago, like you couldn't go anywhere on YouTube and not hear about grit. And basically, some researchers, believe it or not, they figured out that if you just sucked it up and did what you needed to do, that would improve over time. And they called this grit, and they could tell that this was actually more important than even what you were born with. Anyway, lots of details there. Anxiety is the big one, right? We deal with this a lot. We have kids that are over anxious, kids that are under anxious, kids that get in their own head. We're going to kind of dissect that out a bit and see what we can find, building that confidence so that when you get on the blocks, you're happy about it. And then for our coaches out there who are listening, I think that's a big component of what we do. And I think it's a big component of what assistant coaches, people who are new to the sport, that's what they lack the most. They don't see themselves as leaders necessarily. They might see themselves still as babysitters, but if we can help them get to a leadership position, I think that's going to improve their coaching. It's going to improve their swimmers, their parents, right? They're going to be happier in the job. So all of these kind of factor into what we call mental toughness. And I know what I hate most about this realm of thought these days is there's a lot of mixing of terms and a lot of kind of nonsense out there, to be honest. Like people talk about wellness. I'm in the medical world, so I did medical school, I did radiology, extremely difficult environments, right? Your expectations are super high, the cost of failure is high, and there's a lot of this like burnout, right? A lot of doctors get into the job and then after a few years, they're really sick of it, they're tired of it, and they want to quit. And swimming can be, I see swimming as being very similar to that. It's a very difficult sport, huge sacrifices, huge commitment. And people always talk about this wellness, we need to be well. And they try to supplement, this toughness with like pleasure, like going for walks and taking care of yourself and thinking about yourself. Honestly, I think a lot of that goes the wrong direction, and there's books and speakers that are coming out and saying that. I think that I think that we need to focus on being tough rather than being well, right? The job is going to be hard. Swimming is going to be hard. Nothing is going to change that. I'm sorry. It's just a matter of getting yourself to be tough enough to deal with it and not necessarily feeling good about it. Although I think that plays a role. So hopefully I can convince you of to get away from the fluff and to get more into the real stuff. So let's start here, the brain, the animal versus the human. And if you guys notice, in this picture that I drew many years ago, I actually made a mistake. The frontal lobe, here in blue, actually goes a lot further back. It goes all the way back here. So I'm going to draw it in and fix it now that I have a chance. But so to me, there's kind of these two forces that are always fighting in your head. One of them is the limbic system, which is the emotional side, and that's the animal side, right? It's this yellow section. And this is like deep in the brain. It's kind of in the center. And this is where all your emotions come from. Happiness, sadness, confidence, those things. And then the more developed, more human side is this frontal lobe. So this is where decision making happens, planning happens, and this is what actually makes us human, right? If you took out somebody's frontal lobe, back in the day, they used to do frontal lobotomies, so they would cut the frontal lobe from the rest of the brain, and it would turn people into zombies, basically. And what's a zombie? A zombie is just a human. It's just an animal that with no higher thought, no speech process. So these two things still exist in your brain, and they actually kind of fight each other. But before we get that, let's go to just a couple more. Yeah, this is what we said. The big thing that I want you to take away is that these are physical and chemical machines in the brain. Now, there's more to it than that, but for now, just for today, we're going to focus on the machinery of this. So these nerves, think of them as like a big software program that's written into your brain. And some people are born on spectrums of this. Some people, are more happy than others, just at baseline. Some people are more angry than others. Some people are more confident than others, like guys versus girls. Guys are usually more confident, right? So there's a baseline set of emotions that we feel, but that doesn't mean that they don't change, right? The nerves can readjust, they can reconnect, and a lot of what this talk is going to be about, how do we do that? How do we reconnect the nerves so that we readjust our brains to be tougher and to deal with tough situations as we come to them? So the limbic system is producing all these emotions, and if we let them go, they'll be out of control, right? So think about a little kid. So a little kid has essentially no frontal lobe, right? This is the last thing to develop. And so they run mostly off the limbic system. And so what do? They act kind of like our pets, our dogs. When they feel angry, they they throw a tantrum. When they feel sad, they cry. When they feel happy, they're super happy and they're giggling all the time. But as people grow up and their frontal lobe develops, a lot of what happens is this emotional editing, right? So we have a dampening down of the limbic system because the frontal lobe is kind of taking over, and it's moderating emotions so that humans can make the best decisions. They can take in a lot of different information. They plan, they behave, right? And so you have this kind of force that's opposing each other, and that's very common in all of biology, right? Think about hormones. You have hormones that increase glucose levels in the blood. You have hormones that decrease them, and they're both working at the same time. And it depends on which one is being pushed, which direction, on who's going to win, or where the actual blood sugar ends up. So the question is, how are we going to integrate this into what we know? So there needs to be a balance. Like, they both have a place in they both work to make us better in different ways, right? So the limbic system and emotions are power, right? So right before you get up on the blocks, you want to be emotional, right? You want to be feeling it. You want to be there. You want to be ready for the fight. This is almost like the lion pops out of the brush and you need to fight the lion, and that's where those emotions come in and play a role. The frontal lobe is good at kind of that longer term, day by day, forcing yourself to get out of bed in the morning, forcing yourself uh, to race in a certain way, to think about what you're doing when you race. And if you let the limbic system, you've seen this probably in your on your swim team. You have a little kid, they come to you before the race, they're like, okay, let's do 3 dolphin kicks off of every wall. They go up, they do the race, their brain kind of goes foggy, and they do not 3 kicks off every wall. They do 1 kick, or they do no kicks, or they do no streamline, and there's no thought process. And they come back to you, and you're like, "What happened to my 3 kicks off of every wall?" And they're like, "I don't know what happened. Something." So that's when the limbic system is too strong, and it took over, and we had no frontal lobe to kind of have a higher order thought process of what's going on. Anyway, trying to always bring it back to the pool. Hopefully these analogies work. The big thing is that both of these can be altered. So we can always improve both of these systems. We can improve the frontal lobe, controlling the emotions to bring them up, to take them down. And hopefully with practice, we can figure out what's kind of the optimum balance, right? So in Star Wars, there was the balance, the dark and the light, and in between them a little bit of a nerdy tangent or sidetrack. So, okay, let's move to a different topic here, motivation. So, to me, some people will say like motivation is a useless word, right? I mean, it's not motivation that matters, it's discipline. I agree to a degree. I think all of these concepts are true, but I still think it's important to know, like, especially in swimming when it's hard and we're seeing so many kids drop out, and in medicine it's the same thing. Like, I see a lot of people every day they're losing their motivation. They don't want to be there. They're not happy doing it. So can we dissect this down and kind of break it down? So I think motivation, you're trying to satisfy a need, right? There's something missing in your life and you want to put in the missing puzzle piece. What are those missing puzzle pieces? Well, there's a old professor, psychologist called Maslow, Dr. Maslow, and I think this was in the 60s or 50s. He came up with the pyramid of needs, which is this thing on the right here. And he said that we basically start by we need the most basic needs first, and then we progress up the ladder. So if you were naked and afraid in the jungle, the first need that you need is physiologic needs: food, water, shelter, stuff like that, right? Safety. Once you have those, then you look for the next need: safety, security. Once you have those, you move up to the second section, psychology, where you want you want society, you want family, you want friends, these relationships, right? You want a job that gives you a feeling of accomplishment. And when you kind of reach that level, then you move up. Once you have all of these pyramids, they kind of stack on each other. Once you have all of these things, people move into this self-actualized state. It's called self-actualization, where it's kind of this set of personality things where you're really trying to work for yourself, or you're doing things because you want to do them, right? It's not because you need to do them, which is all the things down here. You're doing things because you want to do them, right? And so we want to get our swimmers to go up this pyramid. So if you kind of notice, I'm sure you guys have heard of extrinsic versus intrinsic motivators, right? Little kids are motivated by extrinsic factors. So they swim a good race, they get a piece of candy, or they win the meet, they get a gold medal. These are all extrinsic things, right? They're not swimming for themselves, they're not swimming for the team, they're not swimming for their parents, they're swimming for some like tangible object. And that's okay, and it fits in some places, but that's not very long lasting, right? Because once you get that gold medal, like, you've satisfied the need. So what else is left there, right? So you have to go up the pyramid. Or let's say you don't get better that swim meet, right? I mean, when you're 9 years old, every time you get on the blocks, you go a best time. So it's easy to keep that kid motivated and happy. I mean, what's hard about going faster every time you race? But once that kid reaches 12, 13, 14, that's not happening anymore. So we have a big problem where you're not seeing that progress, and we need to shift uh, the motivation, the locus of the motivation, from extrinsic to intrinsic, right? So let's go through the pyramid one more time. We're going to actually do it in a swimming format. Let me get myself out of the way here. Okay. So let's pretend, what's a basic need for a swimmer. So I swim because, and I think this is a good exercise. If you take this to your kids and you say, what motivates you to be here on the swim team? And you say, I swim because fill in the blank. Early on for young kids, it might be because mom told me so, right? The parents want their kids to be healthy. They want them to make some friends. The kids don't necessarily want to swim, but they're here because somebody told them to. For older college kids, their scholarship and their university like education might ride on it, right? So they're kind of at the bottom totem pole. They just want to keep their scholarship. Very few of us swim because we have to get food. Of course, professional swimmers do, right? I mean, if you're a professional swimmer and that's all you do, that's your livelihood. So your motivation is very basic. Is it good? It can be powerful. Who's not going to work really hard to feed themselves? So it's not necessarily better than the others, but it may not be long lasting, because once you have these things taken care of, well, then you lost your motivation. Once you don't need to satisfy basic needs, you've lost your motivation. So what do? We have to take ourselves up one level. So psychological needs in swimming. I swim because I win gold medals. So I want prestige. I want people to notice that I'm fast. I swim because I want to be on a team. So they want friends. They want to be part of culture, or to make somebody happy, their parents happy. So again, these are, as you can see, now our goals are becoming more more infinite, right? It's not like there's no limit to the amount of gold medals that you can win. There's no limit to the amount of team that you can be on. But again, once you start getting these things, you might start losing the motivation to continue swimming, right? And this is where you see kids to start dropping off. You've seen very fast swimmers, and they're not motivated. They're like, I don't want to do this anymore. The question is why. So can we take them to the next level, which is the self-actualization? I swim because I just want to make myself better, right? This is this is not a goal that can be achieved, right? There's no such thing as I'm the best and I can't ever be any better. There's always something that we can improve. I want to swim because I want to explore my limits. So there's no limit to exploring your limits, right? So once we get to the top of the pyramid, which I think should be the goal, you'll see that swimmers are, they're motivated, and they have something that will constantly motivate them, right? There's no achieving these goals, but the goals are very real, and people want to reach them. And so now we have a much more long-term surviving mentality, right? AKA a tougher mentality when it comes to doing hard things like swimming or medicine or career or marriage or family and all these things, right? All these things kind of spill over into all of our lives, which is why I think this is kind of an important topic to go through. So hopefully the Maslow pyramid makes a little bit of sense, and those factors. And I don't think you should be afraid to teach kids about this, right? I think once they can see it in themselves and they can see it in other swimmers and their family, then they kind of get a little bit better control over what's going on with themselves. Okay. Another factor of self-actualized, so we're at the top of the pyramid, is that person actually cares about what's happening around them. So they want to grow themselves, but they also want to improve the group. And they kind of have a set of personality where they enjoy challenges and they don't mind the failures, right? I think, and this is a whole nother topic when it comes to parenting and coaching, but it's a huge thing to teach your kids that failing is a good thing, right? And failure teaches them, and overcoming failure is going to make them real tough. And we'll get to that part in the kind of the grit section. But somebody who's self-actualized, I'll tell you some real examples here. We've had swimmers on the team. It's a mid-season meet. They're swimming. they have a horrible race. Like just everything went wrong for some reason, one reason or another. And I'm sure you've had swimmers who come to you and they're crying and they're bawling and they're like, this is the end of the world. I don't know what happened. I think I'm losing it, this and that. And we've had other swimmers who come out kind of giggling and happy. You know, this is like an in-season meet, so it's not like the championship meet. And they come up to you and they're like, I don't know what happened. Something went wrong. I guess I'll try to fix it the next time, right? So what kind of swimmer do you want on your team, right? You want somebody who can take failure and see it as a positive. See it like, oh yeah, I definitely missed the wall on the third turn. I breathed too much towards the end. This is something I can grow from, right? Instead of, I missed the wall, I suck, and I'm never going to get better, right? So these are the two kind of pathways that we have to choose and help our swimmers take the right path. So to reach the top, you do need a mostly intact bottom pyramid, right? Which is not impossible to do in this day and age, right? We all get food, we all have shelter, we can all be on a team. But make sure that if your kids are missing something in the bottom of the pyramid, it's going to be very difficult to get them to the top. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So again, can we bring this kind of vague topic to the pool deck, or like what does this actually look like in a swimmer? So Maslow listed out his characteristics here on the left, and then I translated them into kind of swimming characteristics, just to kind of give us a little bit of a real life scenario. So we'll just go through a few of these, won't go through all of them. So a self-actualized person, they perceive reality efficiently and can tolerate uncertainty. Whoops, I made that too big, sorry. Too much aggressiveness with the pen. So they can tolerate uncertainty. What does that mean for a swimmer? Prepared to do any set that's written on the board. They might have some anxiety, right? That's normal, but they have a good attitude towards the hard set. So being able to tolerate something doesn't mean that you don't feel anxious or that you're not worried about something. It doesn't mean that you don't have fear. It just means that you overcome it and that it doesn't overtake you, right? The limbic system does not overtake the frontal lobe. The limbic system helps the frontal lobe. Okay, spontaneous in thought and action, right? They finish a tough set going all out without being told to, right? These are the kids who really, just they see the workout as improving themselves. They're not doing the workout just because coach told them to. Unusual sense of humor, that's pretty much all the swimmers in the world. Let's see here. Resistant to enculturation, but not purposefully unconventional, right? They don't follow the crowd. They have their own thoughts, their own actions. Concern for the welfare of humanity. I like this, right? And I think this is big, and we'll come to this in just a minute on how we fit this into our program, but they're concerned for the team, right? I'm a big believer that you will not be the best swimmer you can be if you're not on a team, right? If you're motivated only by your own self-improvement, that's an easy reason to quit for, right? If the only person who's going to get hurt by you staying in bed at 5 a.m. is you'll stay in bed at 5 a.m, right? That's not a big enough reason to get out of bed. You need other people to depend on you, and you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself in order to have like the best motivation to do the hard things. So the list is there. I'll leave you to read it later if you want to go back and pause the video. Okay, I need a drink real quick. Hopefully this is making sense so far. Hopefully this is, something that you can take to your swim team, like on deck. So let's kind of focus. Let's try to think a little bit more about how to climb the pyramid. Like, are there more practical things that we can do as coaches to set our swimmers up to climb this pyramid? I think there is. A good book I read was Dan Pink's Drive. So he kind of dove into the research behind motivation. And what I really like is that he simplified it. Now his book is centered more around the corporate culture and big businesses and employees, employer type thing. But you can definitely translate this into swim team, into family, into small business, whatever you're doing. So he broke down that there's kind of three key pillars of motivation. Number one was mastery. So people want to see improvement in themselves, right? So again, remember we talked about the little kid. He gets better every time they jump on the blocks, they go faster, right? So they're mastering their sport every time like they're at a swim meet. So they have huge mastery and they're very motivated to continue doing that. But as we said, that kind of dies off. And so we're going to go through some real life examples on how to keep that going even as swimmers get older. Number two is autonomy. So people want to be free, right? They want to be self-directed. They want to have choices. And when you kind of crowd that out too much as a coach, I think coaches tend to do this. I've definitely been a victim of it. I want to micromanage my swimmers. I want them to do this many kicks. I want them to take this many breaths. I want them to have this kind of stroke rate. And for certain groups of people, that is important. But as swimmers get older, they should have more and more autonomy. And so then they feel like they own their own swimming, right? Their swimming belongs to them, and they're not just doing it for somebody else. And then the last one is this purpose, which I think is a huge factor. I mean, not just in swimming, but in all of life. I think we have a whole generation of kids with lacking purpose. Again, different, maybe too broad of a topic right now, but this is why we have to be on a team, because the team is the purpose, right? The whole team getting better, racing together, fighting against records, and this all plays into it. So let's go one by one and kind of break these down. So mastery, again, we said is seeing the improvement. Now, once you're past 10, 11, 12 years old, it's tough to see that improvement, right? Because you might only go faster once or twice a season. But we can help our swimmers see themselves get better, day by day, week by week. So for instance, I like to do these progression sets. Not necessarily every single set is a progression set, but at least once a week, you have a set that's the same or a recurring set, and it gets harder and harder throughout the season, and the swimmers can see themselves getting better every time they do the set. So here's an example. Let's say week 1, we do 5 100s on 2 minutes, right? They accomplish it. Great. We do a week of training. We come back week number 2, we're going to do 8 instead of 100, 8 100s instead of 5. The next week we do 10, right? And so they're seeing themselves improve, right? We could only do 5 and it was hard. Then we did 8 and it was hard. Now we're doing 10, right? Awesome. So then we restart the cycle. Now we do 5 100s on the 145, and then you do 8, and then you do 10, and then you restart again and you increase. So throughout the whole season, you have this progression, right? Weightlifters don't struggle with progression because they can see the weight on the bar, and like almost every week they're going up, or they're going up in weight, or they're going up in reps, or something like that. I think we need to take that kind of mentality and transfer it to swimming at least some of the time, so that we can show that the kids are getting better, they're improving, and remind them, right? Like remind them, hey, a month ago you could only do 5 100s on 2 minutes. Now you're doing 5 100s on 145. So look how you're getting better, right? So this is mastery. And when it comes to technique or the IM or something like that, always work on weaknesses. Kids always tend to want to focus on their strengths because that's easy, right? That's the easy way out. But if you can show them but it's going to be easier to improve their weaknesses, right? Because there's more room to grow there. So getting kids to focus on their weakness, I think, helps show them that they can master new skills, and that will keep them motivated. Okay, autonomy. So we want kids to own their own swimming, right? We don't want them to feel like they're coming to the pool deck because mom and dad told them so. We don't want them to feel that, sometimes we want coach to have authority, which we'll talk about at the end of the section here. But especially as they get older, it's important to give kids some choice or some time off. So I'll give you an example from the book, that Drive book. Like Google and 3M were early pioneers in this, right? They gave their employees initially, I don't know if they do it anymore, they gave them like 20% time off during the day to work on whatever they wanted, right? Whatever project they wanted. And Google actually had some of the best ideas come out of that time off. For instance, Gmail came out of that time. Can you imagine Google without Gmail? I mean, it doesn't even make sense on how they missed the boat on that. But just by giving their people time off, that's, the best ideas come from there. So how do we translate that to swimming? Obviously, we have a big team. We can't just be like, hey, 30 minutes, do whatever you want, right? They're all going to just play sharks and minnows or chat on the side of the pool. So I like it to be more structured, right? Especially for younger swimmers, and to give them an option. So maybe I'll write multiple sets. So instead of saying this is the kick set, this is what we're going to do for the next hour, I maybe write a few of them up on the board, 3 of them, and I say, look, here are 3 kick sets. Which one do you guys as a group want to do? And so now they've chosen what set they're going to do, and so they own that set. It belongs to them now. They have that autonomy, and they're going to try way harder, and they're going to do way better in that set than if I just forcefully told them to do it. Maybe during swim meets, you practice different race strategies. So, kids come to you before the race, before the 400 IM, and you're like, okay, how do you want to race this? Do we go out fast on the butterfly? Do we take it easy on the butterfly? Do we kick hard on the backstroke? Do we lay off the legs on the backstroke? Stuff like that. Saying just like choice drill, choice stroke, I think that's kind of a weak way to do this. I mean, maybe it qualifies, but I would encourage you to have kind of a more robust, more structured way to do this. Sometimes, another thing, I didn't write it in here, but during taper, I'll say okay, I want you to do 500 yards or 1,000 yards of your choice. So you decide what you're going to work on, what you think is going to improve you for the upcoming swim meet. So you can even give a yards limit to it. Okay, purpose. So hugely important, right? If you don't have a purpose or a drive behind what you're doing, it's going to be really difficult to survive in this sport, because it's hard and it really sucks, especially when it's not going your way. Friedrich Nietzsche, he had a great quote on this. He who has any why, who has a why to live, can bear almost any how. Right? So we as coaches and as the sport of swimming, it's going to demand anyhow. You're going to have to get up early, get in the pool multiple times, control what you eat, sacrifice, not go to the parties, not stay up late, and you have to have a good reason for that. So people want to do things for big reasons, and this comes to building that team culture. So how do we do that? How do we do that in real life? I think these are a few examples. So I think using your team to contribute to the community. So doing things outside of pool time together. You set up a time where you're all going to go visit the children's hospital, and you're going to play with the kids, right? Or the team is going to work at the food bank or the food drive. So things like that, right? You put the team together so that now you're not just swimmers, you're actually part of the whole town. And you're actually doing things together to make life better for everybody around you. Another way that I really like to do, and the kids love it, the big kids, the little kids, is you have sessions maybe once a week or every other week where the big kids are coaches. They're coaching the little kids. And I've done it where I'll set up stations around the pool, maybe 4 or 5 stations. And at each station, they're going to work on a set of drills, like flip turns. And they go through the big kids teach the little kids to go through 3 different sets of flip turn drills, and or dives on another section, and butterfly on a third section. So why is this working? Because it's building the community, it's building the whole team together, right? The big kids take ownership. Now they see the little swimmers as their little swimmers, right? These are my kids that I've coached, and the little kids feel like, wow, the big kids are paying attention to me. They want me to get better. They want me to take over the swim team and to get better like they are, right? They look up to the big kids. So it's a huge motivator. I've gotten the best feedback from parents when we do this, and from big kids, little kids, all around. So if there was only one thing that you ended up doing, that's the one I would encourage. And then as a coach, your goal or your job, number one job, is to set the expectations. And we always want to set them a little higher than everyone is comfortable with. And when you set a goal, like a team expectations, we're going to qualify 5 people for state. We're going to try to get 3rd place in state. We're going to try to qualify for juniors. Now the whole team is working towards a goal. And this is a lot easier to do like on high school teams, which is why we encourage kids to go do high school, regardless of the quality of coaching or what you think about that. Because you really can't get that team atmosphere on a club like you do in high school. Same with colleges. So anyway, just some ideas out there for you guys to kind of chew on and contemplate. All right, so let's talk a little bit about these terms, self-control and grit. This is just practice of making yourself do something that's hard, right? So sometimes it really is as simple as just sucking it up. So you wake up in the morning and your choices are to go to practice or to watch TV, right? How do we get to the practice? How do we get the kids to decide the right thing? Well, it's just self-control, right? So what's the definition of this? Short-term ability to control emotions, right? So this is, again, going back to that first section. It's the frontal lobe controlling the limbic system, right? The limbic system says, no, I don't want to go do something hard. I want to rest and sleep. But the frontal lobe is what we're going to develop, and it's going to say, no, shut up. We need to go to practice. We need to get better. Grit is long-term ability to work consistently despite setbacks and years of challenges, right? So self-control is short-term, so avoiding the cake, getting up early, working hard during the workout. Grit is being able to sustain that practice over a long period of time. So Angela Duckworth is the psychologist who wrote a book called Grit, very creative, which kind of goes through a lot of examples of where this fits in, and I'll just give you a couple here. So she researched what made people successful at West Point, right? So the kids graduate high school, they're very talented, they have high functioning status, they're smart, they exercise, and so they get accepted to West Point, right? The epitome of the military academy. West Point is very hard, right? You get up early, you do drills, you get yelled at, you have intense training sessions, you have to be really smart, and not everybody makes it, right? I think they have, somewhere in the 20 to 40% dropout rate. So she wanted to figure out, well, who are the kids that are dropping out and who are the kids that are sticking with it? And so you would think that the people who had the highest IQ or were in the best shape were the ones who were most successful at West Point. That's actually not true. It was partly true, but it's not the full story. It was actually the people who had the most grit, the people who could suck it up the most and deal with the pain and overcome and be persistent and not quit. Those were the ones who succeeded, despite having, even if they didn't have the highest IQ, even if they didn't have the best body composition. They find the same thing with, what are they called? The Navy SEALs, right? Simon Sinek, if you ever look up Simon Sinek, he talks about this story. He asked Navy SEAL instructors, like, how do you know who's going to succeed in the Navy SEALs? Is it the strongest? Is it the fastest? Is it the smartest? They said, no, the jocks and the football players, they never make it. They never last in Navy SEALs. It's the people who, even in their worst time, can push through and motivate the guy next to them. So again, we're tying back this purpose, culture thing into grit. So that's kind of the idea behind grit and self-control. It's like you want these short-term ability to control emotions plus a long-term ability to suck it up, right? So how do we build that? Is there a way that we can physically help our kids to do this on a day-to-day basis? I think here's some examples. Maybe you hold each other accountable, right? So if somebody doesn't show up to practice, I mean, do we just let it go? Or do you have the swimmers hold each other accountable? Do they walk up to that person and be like, hey, why weren't you at morning practice? We all showed up and you didn't. Like, next time you better come. Or, I don't know. That's just an example. Start with small things. For some people, getting out of bed is like the hardest thing they do that day. And they're suffering from depression. They have huge problems in their lives, and they kind of get caught in this vicious cycle where they don't want to do anything. And one of the things psychologists use, if you listen to, like, I know I throw out all these names, hopefully some of them stick. If you listen to like Jordan Peterson, right? He had clients where they literally, like, they couldn't get out of bed. And so they would write down that goal for the week was to get out of bed. And then, they could do it. And once they did it, they write down another goal. So these are we're setting short-term goals to build ourselves up. The next goal, we're going to do the dishes. We're going to clean up the house. The next goal is we're going to update our resume. The next goal, we're going to apply for 5 jobs, right? So you start at a small area and you build your way up, right? So you don't necessarily have to start with 7 morning practices a week. You start with 1, and then you build it up to 2, and then 3, something like that. I'm just kind of spitballing here. Another thing, and I think this helps with the, these all help with the self-control part of it. What about grit? Grit is this long-term thing. So I think you need to write out long-term goals, right? And in the book, I go a little bit more into detail on the differences between different goals and how they kind of fit together throughout the season. But, maybe your long-term goal is to be a Division I swimmer, or to make the varsity squad, or make the Olympic trials, something like that. But something that you can always remember during the tough times or during the failing times, like, no, I'm still trying to get to this promised land down the road. So I have something that I'm working for. The biggest thing, I think, is to teach kids that nothing that they do is permanent, right? Failure is not permanent, and that they can always grow out of it. They can always improve. What's the Winston Churchill quote? Failure is not fatal. What is it? Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. The courage to continue is all that matters, right? Something like that. Super important. I love that quote for kids to, just even when they fail or when they succeed, that's not the point. The point is to keep going, right? All right, let's kind of change directions here. We're going to talk about anxiety, turning the bad feelings into good ones, right? This is probably something we deal with on a day-to-day basis, at least at every swim meet, right? You have kids that are too anxious. You have kids that don't care, so they're on the other side of the spectrum where they're apathetic. So can we break this down in a way that can help our swimmers? So first thing to understand is that anxiety is good, at least at a baseline. It helps us take care of business. Think about when you're taking a test, you get the butterflies. It helps you focus. It helps you do good on the test. It helps you think harder. When you're leaving the house and you feel anxious that you forgot something, you start looking around for your keys. And before you race, you start getting the butterflies, you start getting anxious. That's because it's going to help you perform, right? You don't want to fight the lion like sitting on your couch. You want to fight the lion standing up tall and being ready to give it your all. And those feelings translate into something that we call anxiety. So it's a very powerful form of energy that we want to use. Obviously, if we have too much of it, it gets out of control, and it can make our swimming worse, and it can make our lives worse. So again, we have that battle between the limbic system and the frontal lobe, and if the limbic system is winning too much, we need the frontal lobe to come back and get it into gear. So we want to manage it. So there's a lot of theories, even in sports, especially in sports psychology, where people kind of wanted to determine, well, like, what's the optimum level of anxiety to get the optimum level of performance, right? And and there's a lot of ways to kind of dissect this. There's a lot of arguing back and forth. So, the first most simple one is this drive theory. So that the more anxious you are, or the more like hyped up you are. So anxiety is maybe not the best term, but in the science they use the word arousal. It's kind of a, I don't know. That maybe not be the best word, but hyped up. If you think hyped up, so the more hyped up you are, the better you're going to perform, right? Well, is that true? I mean, we've seen kids that get too hyped up and they go and they spin their wheels and they don't go anywhere and they start missing the wall. So is there an optimum way? So there's an inverted U theory where there's an optimum amount of of anxiety that makes the best amount of performance. There's a different one, optimal functioning. So different swimmers are going to have different peaks at different stages, right? Maybe a swimmer needs to be more calm to perform their best. Maybe a different swimmer needs to be really hyped up to perform their best, right? You see those Olympians, they're all smashing their chest. One guy's smashing his chest, the other guy's just listening to music, not moving. Maybe that works differently for different swimmers. So there may not be a one size fits all. Maybe this MDAT, I wrote it in the book. I totally forgot what this means, but that's okay. MDAT basically says like maybe the mind needs to be calm and it needs to have a low anxiety state, but the body needs to be anxious and it needs to have a high anxiety state. And maybe that's what will create the best performance. I like to translate this into like the taekwondo or the jiu-jitsu or the MMA fighter, right? They're kind of just standing there calm, no expression on their face, but inside they're like they're burning up, right? They're ready to go. So how do we put this all together in swimming? I've kind of gone on this rant. I think it depends on the race, to be honest. Like this drive theory, I think the 50 and the mile, you want to be as hyped up as possible, right? The 50 is so short, you don't have time to think about it. You want the limbic system to do most of the work. And so you want to pop off the block and kind of have a blank mind and just go, 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 go. And then in the mile is painful and long. And so also you want to be hyped up and you want to go and you want to maintain, you want to have a high anxiety to dull the pain and to keep a high effort throughout the whole race. But that's not necessarily going to be good for the 200, right? In the 200, you have to be kind of reserved. You can't go all out on the first 50. You can't lose sight of the other swimmers in the race. And so maybe you don't want to be all the way out here hyped up to the nth degree. Maybe we need to be a little more balanced and just kind of ready to go, but not overly anxious. So I think this can depend on swimmer. I think it can depend on race. Now the question is, well, how do I get myself to these different places? Like we've talked about being on this spectrum. Is there a way that we can teach our swimmers to shift back and forth as needed? I think that it is possible, and these are kind of the ways that you can try with your swimmers. So on one end of the spectrum is apathy, like you just don't care, you're there for nothing. And on the other end of the spectrum is this anxiety where you're too anxious, right? And the world's falling apart. We want to hit the optimum level in the middle, right? So let's say your swimmer is kind of sitting on the sidelines. It's been 2 hours since they last raced, and they don't care about this swim meet anymore. They don't care about the session, and they're too apathetic. So we want to get them to move this direction on the graph. Well, getting some pump up music, always an easy way to start doing that. Imagery, so closing your eyes and visualizing the race and seeing yourself on how you're going to do it. So I just watched the documentary in the IMAX theater about the Blue Angels. So the Blue Angels are super amazing fighter pilots who go around the country and showcase these F-18s. And before every session, the day before or the morning of, they will sit together. So you have 6 guys in the Blue Angel squad, and they'll sit together at the desk, not in the jet, and they'll all close their eyes, hands on the wheel or hands on the joystick, and they go through the motions together. And in the documentary, it's unbelievable. So they have a leader who's giving them directions, and like a machine, they all move at once and they all do the same thing at the same time. So image, I mean, this is not just for swimming. This is not just for, you know, giggles. This is actually like something that's really used by the very top best performers in the world. So imagining your race, imagining how you want to do it. And then the third way to get yourself to the right is this self-talk. Now I want to take a pause, and I think I mentioned it later, but self-talk is not lying to yourself. Okay, so if you're, and maybe I hurt some feelings out here, that's okay, I don't mind. If you're 5'2", 300 pounds, and you're looking in the mirror and you're saying, I'm beautiful, no, not really, right? That's called lying. That's not what we want to do. We want self-talk. It should look more like, I want to do these things in the race. I want to jump off the blocks, hit my streamline, and pause. I want to jump off the turns, and I'm going to do 4 dolphin kicks. I can do 4 dolphin kicks, right? That's the self-talk that I would rather swimmers do, rather than, I'm the best, I'm going to win, I can do this, I can do this. No, we need specific things to do during the race. So these 3 things are kind of examples that move you that direction on the graph. Well, what if we have kids that are here? They're too anxious and they need to calm down. Like, they need to bring it back. They're losing themselves, and we need to relax a little bit. So breathing exercises. So closing your eyes, sitting down, controlling your breathing in and controlled on the way out. And then muscle relaxation. So I always think of the brain and muscles kind of, they talk to each other and they get feedback from each other. So if the brain is too anxious and it's getting your muscles too anxious and jittery and sweating, you can reverse that from the bottom up. So there's a technique where you kind of sit and you go one by one, like from your toes, you try to focus on one muscle at a time and you relax it. So you relax your toes, and once that feels good, then you relax your calves. And then once that feels good, you relax your hamstrings and your thighs, right? And you work your way up, and by the time you get to the top, you've kind of shifted a little bit from anxious state to the more middle of the graph. And that way we get the best performance that we can do. Again, are these all going to work for everybody in the same way? No, but at least you can teach your swimmers and make them aware and conscious of what's going on in their brain so that they can control this and maybe practice and see what works for them. Okay, so we'll go through confidence real quick. Again, this is kind of a big part of sports psychology. You'll see this come up a lot. Confidence is just the belief that your abilities are better than your competitors. So boys, rightly or wrongly, are usually born with a little bit more self-confidence than girls. But for either gender, we can kind of practice this in 3 different ways. So number 1, your skill will determine your confidence, right? If you get on the blocks and you haven't been to a single practice, a swim practice, you're not going to have a lot of confidence that you're going to be doing well in that race, right? And for good reason, because you didn't practice. So practice makes skills, which makes confidence, right? Number 2, you have to be a little brave. You have to live outside your comfort zone. That doesn't mean that you don't have fear. It just means that you overcome it and you ignore it to a certain degree, and you put yourself out there and you just try to do something that you're not capable of. And that's a normal thing to build confidence, right? And I think if you don't tell kids that they need to be brave, they may not think that they need to, so they may not think of it. So mention it to them by word. And then kind of emotional confidence. Some people say fake it till you make it, right? To a degree, that's kind of true, right? You're not going to just go up there and have the confidence all the time. Sometimes you need to pretend like you're confident. But when you do the race and you see yourself succeed and you see yourself improve, that mastery that we talked about, that will start building into an emotion on its own and start feeding into itself and become a self-feeding cycle. So these are kind of the things of, confidence. So are there some real ways that we can imagine this? As I was doing the research for this topic, one thing I came across is that team confidence builds individual confidence. So you as a coach, if you can have a team with a high goal, This helps individuals be more confident and help them perform better. If you have a team with good culture where everyone's cheering for each other, right? If you have a whole group of people cheering for you, you're going to be more confident in the race versus if you have a bunch of kids just sitting on their phones, Snapchatting each other all swim meet, which of course is a horrendous thing. You don't want that on your team at all. For the individual, we talked about imagery, so this can help build that self-confidence. Once you can imagine yourself swimming the race the right way, it helps activate the right nerves and get them ready to perform the race correctly. So the way I like to think of it is imagining your race kind of sets the tone for your nerves in the brain, which actually turns into a real life performance once you actually go do it. And those things altogether improve confidence. And then we talked about self-talk. So again, we're not going to lie to each other or to ourselves, but we're going to tell ourselves things that we want to happen. We're going to keep the tempo up on the fourth 50 of the 200 butterfly, right? I can maintain my tempo. I'm not going to let it go down. Stuff like that. Okay. Last topic here, almost there. If you guys have made it through so far, I commend you. I think this is a big topic, kind of tough, kind of vague. It's tough to get like a real, solid grasp on these things. So good job for sticking with it. Leadership. So this is big for our coaches out there. What is leadership? You want to make other people better, right? That's the goal here. There's many definitions out there. There's 1,000 books. Maybe one of my favorite definitions is a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way, right? So you're the first one on deck. You're the last one to leave. You got the sets up on the board. You can explain why we're doing this, right? That's a big reason why I do these webinars and why I wrote those books is I want coaches to know why they're doing what they do. Making others better, going back to that theme. So how do we do that as a coach? So if a swimmer starts here, they're the black dot in the middle. If it was only up to the swimmer, they would only progress to where they're in their comfort zone, right? They would stay in the bubble. They would never leave the bubble. You as a coach, your job is to push them beyond the comfort zone, beyond the bubble, to set the expectations higher than they're comfortable with, and then to motivate them to get there, right? So this is where you want swimmers to go, and it's not going to be comfortable for them, and that's fine. That's your job as a coach. So this can take different forms. There's many different ways of coaching or of leadership. So there's this transformational leadership where you're like constantly giving these motivational talks and you're inspiring the team, you're inspiring the parents. There's servant leadership where you are acting as a servant and people, you're doing the Jesus thing where he was a servant, you're being a servant, and people follow you for that and they want to be like you for that. There's the autocratic leadership where you're giving the orders and everybody has to fall in line and you're micromanaging. There's kind of a more laid back way to do it. There's a bureaucratic way. And then number 9 is my favorite, which is of course what we're going to use. Anytime I run into a situation where there's a bunch of choices and I don't know which one is right, I choose them all. So situational is all the above, right? But I want to give you an actual like real life scenario of where these fit in. So when should you be an autocratic, like dictator type coach? It's with the younger swimmers, right? They don't have a frontal lobe. They don't have self-control. They don't have impulse control, and they don't know what they're doing yet. They've been in the sport for, just a short time. So we are going to be the boss. We're going to be the ones who hold authority. We're going to do things our way. And then as they progress, we loosen up. So with older swimmers who are more experienced and they know themselves and they want more autonomy and ownership, we go into this laissez-faire or democratic leadership. So they participate in their own training. You kind of let them deal with things on their own a little bit. Transformational. So you're inspiring staff. So this is how I would be with my assistant coaches, right? I don't want to just I don't want to micromanage assistant coaches all the time, maybe when they're brand new, but as they progress and get better, I want them to be intellectually stimulated, like it says here. I want them to be inspired, and I want them to take ownership of their own leadership abilities, right? At swim meets, you want to be super charismatic and kind of bubbly, and this almost cheerleader like leader, right? So you transform that way. Being a servant or a bureaucrat is good with parents. So parents need leadership too, right? They're probably new to the team. You need them to help officiate. You need them to help run the scoreboard and the actual meet. So you might need to be a little bit more like have regulations and policies and different, those kinds of things. So there's a time and a place for all of these different types of leadership. And I think being aware and compartmentalizing will make you a better coach, right? I would say probably most coaches get themselves in trouble because they're fairly autocratic on the pool deck, which is good, which is right. But then when they go to deal with parents, they stay autocratic. They want to instruct the parents on what to do, and that gets them in big trouble, right? Because the parents are the customers. They're the ones paying, and they don't want to necessarily be told like what to do, when to do, and micromanaged, right? They need to be brought into the team as kind of a co-leader, essentially. So you can see how like you can really, like, if you don't compartmentalize these things, you can get yourself into some trouble, or you could be kind of just a less optimal leader than you want to be. Again, leadership, I would say if you had to choose, there's kind of three things in a swimmer, and let's break it down here. So there's character, there's the process, and there's results, right? Obviously, at the end of the day, we want swimmers to swim fast. We want the results to be there. But surprisingly, focusing on the results I'm kind of blocking the screen here. Focusing on the results all the time is not going to actually get you the results, right? We've all experienced this to some degree. The process feeds into the results. But again, that's not necessarily going to be enough, right? We've been here for an hour talking about motivation. Just because you write the best workout on the board doesn't mean that the swimmers are going to be like fully invested and motivated to do it right. So how do you start as a leader? You want to work on kids' character, right? So these are the things we talked about: motivation, grit, self-control, but there's a whole list of things, right? Being loyal, showing up on time, working hard, having a good work ethic, not lying to yourself, to your swimmers, to your parents. Once you have somebody with good character, then they can do the training right. Then they can race right. Then they can overcome failure correctly, right? So now they're really advancing and they're really excelling at the process of swimming, and they're not just going through the motions, right? Going through the motions will definitely not get you there. And once we master the process, that is going to turn into a result. That's going to turn into getting a best time, winning, that self-actualization that we talked about a long time ago. So, as a leader, as a coach, don't just think of yourself as somebody who writes workouts and takes splits and gives some feedback. I think if you kind of picked up some books and force yourself to be a character leader and to build kids up from the ground, then that's going to get you the best result at the end of the day. Much more effort. It takes a lot of time to put together things to teach kids and to teach parents, but this is how the best swimmers become the best swimmers, right? Because you want them to be the best people to begin with. Parents, you can't leave them behind, so you want to teach parents on how to interact with their kids as best they can. The research shows that kids like supportive parents, but they don't like them to interfere. And I'm sure many of us coaches know what that feels like, right? When the kid gets done with the race, they go to their parent and the parent starts telling, well, you should have done this and you should have done that and you didn't kick hard enough. Again, you want to teach the parents the boundaries. You want to teach for the reasons that we've kind of explained earlier, right? We want the kids to own their own swimming. We want them to own their own failure. Let's say they had a bad race. We want them to own their own failures. We want them to deal with overcoming, because otherwise they're not going to learn grit. They're not going to learn self-control. They're not going to learn emotional mastery, and they're going to be stunted. Actually, I just started a book called, what's it called? Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Are Not Growing Up, by Abigail Schreier. And this is becoming a huge topic. And you can go back to people like Jonathan Haidt, and Coddling of the American Mind was his major book a few years ago. You can look up just videos of interviews with these people or talks that they've given, and you'll see how all of this plays in, where kids really need to learn how to deal with problems on their own. And so getting parents to limit their interference and to let the kids deal with things on their own, deal with their coaches, deal with their teammates that they don't get along with. These are all positive things for swimmers. So as a parent, what do you do when a kid comes up to you, your swimmer comes up to you after the race, you say, "Good job, I love to watch you swim," and that's it, right? But if you as a coach don't tell the parents this, they're not going to know. They're going to think that it's their job to instruct the kid, which in all other aspects of life, that's true. But in this one, we want the kids to be, kind of take ownership on their own. So how do you become a better leader? The first thing is you want to tell people that, you're taking this seriously, this leadership role. It shows that you care. Helping set goals, tells kids and parents that you're thinking about being a leader or thinking about the team even when you're not on the pool deck. Like, this is your main brain power. It's what's devoted to. I go through this in other videos and in the book more, but coaching at swim meets, how are you a good leader at coaching at swim meets? And I came up with this diagram a long time ago, is that you want to coach to the center, right? You're going to have kids that are too happy, kids that are too sad, kids that get done with a race and they didn't do well and they're too angry, or you have kids that are going up for a race that just don't care and they're apathetic, and you want to bring everyone back to the center, right? So a kid gets done with a race, they're super mad, things didn't go well. Well, you need to bring them back to closer to apathy. It's like, hold on. It's just swimming. We're not going to lose our minds over one bad race. That doesn't mean that the whole season is shot. We analyze what went right. We analyze what went wrong. We decide how we're going to fix what went wrong, and we move on, right? So you move them from this anger state a little bit more to the center. Same thing with all of these different emotions, right? So coaching at meets, that's how you're a good leader. You bring people to the middle. We focus on the process, not the results. We want to be a good model. Educate. So if you're sitting through this hour-long talk about motivation and psychology, take this back to your team. Take this back to your assistant coaches. Take it back to your parents. Take it back to your your swimmers, and teach them, right? Grow them in different ways than just how to swim butterfly faster, how to get across what I like to say, how to get a man-made puddle of water faster than the other person. That's not enough. We need to go deeper, and we want kids to grow in different ways. So Simon Sinek, I mentioned earlier, he has another great quote. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, right? He always gives this example of Apple and the iPhone. iPhone was not the first smartphone. It was not necessarily new technology, but Apple presented it in a way that was revolutionary and countercultural. And so they had a very big why behind what they were doing, right? The what was the iPhone, but the why was their advertising and marketing. And that's what made it so successful, more successful than other phones at the same time that did similar things. So, wow, you guys made it. I made it. My voice made it. Again, if you want to dive deeper, we've got the courses, we've got the books, we've got the coupon codes. Hopefully this was useful to you guys. If it was, do all the usual things, the thumbs up button, the subscribe button, share with people. We love to get this information out if it helps anybody with their coaching and their swim team. And again, thank you for sticking with this longer format one. and hopefully we'll see you again next time.